Hello, this is Gary with Gabbin with Gary. We want to know. Had an awesome interview with Laramie Police Chief Browne. Thank you so much to the Laramie Police Department for everything they do for us out here in Laramie. And here's a great chance to meet the chief. And thank you so much for everything. Again, this is Gary with Gabbin with Gary. Hello, I'm Gary with GDS Video Productions, and we have Chief Browne here with the Laramie Police Department, and we're here to ask him some questions. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Gary?
Pretty good. Sorry we have to do this again.
Oh, that's all right. I'm looking forward to it. Anytime.
You guys are really awesome.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I do have some questions for you. I think we were talking before about your jiu-jitsu, and I was very interested in that, and that you were actually teaching in SoCal, right?
Correct. Yes.
And how long were you teaching?
So I was probably teaching for the last 6 or 7 years, and then I've been doing it since, I would say probably '08. So it's been a long haul, about 15 years. It's something I've been passionate about, and I think it's something that would really benefit law enforcement. Gives our officers the additional tools to use in use of force scenarios. And I actually had an opportunity to write an article about it for Police One publication. And my goal is really to implement it in our current police training style, but really to be proficient, it's about consistency and training regularly in it to have the tools that you need. I think the public generally thinks that when we respond to calls, we're Bruce Lee. Unfortunately, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
It takes several years and countless hours of training to rise to that level. So I think we can definitely do better as a profession to make sure that our officers are well trained. And I think jiu-jitsu, judo, any type of the grappling arts really give our officers additional tools to control individuals. So that's what I'm looking forward to helping our profession as a whole with, but specifically the Laramie Police Department.
Do we have a lot of problems with violence like that where you actually need the grappling?
Yeah, so it's a way of control, and the majority of our use of force scenarios that we look at are actually people oftentimes trying to get away from officers. So being able to know how to use your body weight to control somebody, to keep them down and safely take them into custody without having to use strikes or additional force options such as tasers, batons, or even firearms. It's paramount that we're efficient with what we do and we have the ability to control people.
See, I didn't feel like we had a lot of that violence here in town, but unfortunately, it's a town.
You know, you never know what's going to happen. And in any law enforcement scenario, you have the potential to deal with people who are under the influence of drugs or intoxicated, and that really does happen on a daily basis across any community in the United States. You never know what type of call you're going to respond to, and it only takes one time for us not to be prepared for something to go wrong. So as a chief of police, it's important that I give our guys the tools to be prepared when they need to use it, whether it's once a day or hopefully never, but even once a year. We still want them to be as prepared as possible when that time comes.
And I'm sorry to jump around. You said you were a medic before in the Army.
Yes.
Have you had to use that experience in the field here, on the civilian field?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think what the community doesn't realize a lot of times is that our officers are in the field 24/7. So at any given time, we'll have 4 or 5 police cars out in the field, a supervisor out in the field, and they have the ability to respond to an emergency call much faster than the fire department does typically. And realistically, our fire department is very efficient. They get there very quickly, but you're still looking at 4 or 5 minute response times for the fire department. Our guys can be there in 30 to 45 seconds. So in an emergency situation, those first 4 or 5 minutes are paramount to provide life-saving efforts, and that's what we train our officers to do here. And I have used that numerous times throughout my career, whether it's somebody having a baby or CPR.
That's awesome.
Yeah, or maybe a car accident where you've had to use first aid tools. So that's something that we definitely intend to use. We actually just signed a policy to provide our officers with Narcan. And what that does is it gives us the ability to use that tool on people who are affected by opioids or specifically fentanyl. And are unconscious at the time, we can get them to respond and provide an immediate service.
It's terrible. I carry it in my vehicle as well because, well, I'm that person. I like to be able to be prepared.
Sure, and we expect the same thing of our officers. We want them to have the tools they need to save as many lives as they can whenever the situation arises.
We were talking about larceny before. Is larceny a high percentage here in town?
So to be honest with you, it kind of varies. It depends on what you'll see is different crews coming into town, especially towns like this where they're driving through from either Cheyenne or somewhere in Colorado, and they realize maybe that there's what type of environment we have. We have a very friendly community, a very open environment. It's typical to see people with their doors unlocked, their cars running in their parking lot in the parking lot as they run in the gas station. So those are prime victims for those burglars to go and attack. And so I would caution our public, hey, it's always better to be safe than sorry, and make sure that you lock up your properties, that you don't leave valuable things in your car where there's easy access to it. But by and large, we have a very safe community. We don't see that too often. And when we do, it's usually people driving through. But we don't want to be a soft target either for those people committing those burglaries.
Do we have a lot of burglaries and robberies in town?
So as of right now, it's actually down in a low, but you'll see it's like a roller coaster. So sometimes you'll find somebody, or you'll have a certain gang type come through, or a certain individual from a different community that comes through, and they kind of set up shop here, and you can see them stay for a couple months at a time. And you'll see those open door thefts where people are just checking door handles, going into cars, unlock cars, and stealing stuff.
I was wondering if that happens here, so I was watching that actually on TV the last couple of days.
So I'll tell you, by and large, it's not happening here. But we want to make sure that we have the safest community, that our officers are aware of what's going on, and that we are a hard target for those thieves. So when they do come in our community, they realize that this isn't an easy target for them.
See, I'd be really surprised that any robberies would happen here.
Sure.
Because it's very much like Montana. Everybody owns a weapon in their home, and I can't understand why someone like in Montana, you're just shot.
Sure.
So I don't understand why anyone would pick coming to this kind of town.
So, and that's one of the reasons why Wyoming is the least violent, has the least violent crime in the nation, is for that very reason, is you never know who's going to have a firearm on them. So that, which is great. It gives our citizens the ability to protect themselves. But at the same time, you never know who's going to come from where and what they know about the community. They may not realize that if they're coming from out of state. So those are things that we're cautious of, and we really do put a lot of investigative hours to the ones that we do get, because we want to make sure that we have the ability to take those people into custody and return property when it's appropriate to do so.
And I'm sorry to keep on jumping, but I noticed, well, one, we have a glass shop right downtown, right across the street from the fire department, I believe. And how much does stuff like that affect in our county? Is there a lot of marijuana use? Is there a lot of problems with people actually having to be arrested for something like that?
So it kind of depends, and it's kind of the same thing. It ebbs and flows. It really depends on a lot of things. With marijuana specifically, what's going on in the college, what type of students that we have enrolled in the semester, what's going on in our high school, what's going on in our middle school. A lot of those things are incumbent on the parents to make sure that they're providing the appropriate education to students. And if you look at it from the standpoint of cigarettes, how much the Surgeon General really puts into warning people about cigarette, how much they cost, taxes.
They're horrible.
And it's very evident, right? There's TV commercials, there's a lot of advertisement dollars in that. You don't see that as much as with the marijuana trade, at least right now, especially when we have a state next to us that legalizes it in Colorado. So it's not a huge problem at this time, but we do see it pretty frequently. So.
And do you think it's because, well, I know that they tried to get it on the ballot a couple years ago, but I heard or I read that you actually have to have signatures in every county to be able to have anything on the ballot. Is that true?
Well, so I'll say this. I think the best predictor of the future for us is what's going on in the states around us. And you did see some marijuana laws passed in South Dakota, where it's certain types of marijuana under certain circumstances has been legalized. So I would say that it's probably coming here eventually, but as law enforcement, my preference would be not to have it at all. But at the same time, if we can put safe requirements on it where maybe it's just medical use, we have to be as proactive as we can and make sure that it meets the community needs. And at the end of the day, the voters decide those issues. So is it a possibility? Yes, I think it's a possibility, especially when you look at what's going on nationwide in the trends. And we'll deal with that when it gets here.
And funny actuality, someone asked me about that on a podcast yesterday, and I'm like, I got to talk to the chief tomorrow.
Right.
I'll throw that in just to ask, because people, I deal with a lot of vets since I am a vet as well.
Sure.
And I hear a lot of grumbling just because, people don't want to have to take all the head meds all the time,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm on head meds too.
Right.
But, we all have some kind of issue.
Yeah.
But, I just hear them complain, and I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and I think that issues like that should be left to the voters. They should decide what they want in their communities. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Right. Do you see the way our city is going in any way that's probably something bad's coming up? Do we have any distractions coming in that may affect our police ability?
I actually think it's the opposite. And I look at our current relationship with our city council and our community leaders and our city leaders, and I just see a tremendous amount of partnership going on, especially with the university. I see a group of people who really, really want to help the community, our nonprofit partners. And it's been great getting to know everybody, meeting everybody, and seeing how much people care about this community.
Do you feel that came from the older people or do younger people as well? Because I feel the younger people have almost zero tolerance for authority. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually think it's from both. I think often that's the perception because of the generational issues. And oftentimes, instead of looking at it from a negative side, I think it's just different. And I think we see a youth that have a lot of strengths, and the generations coming up, their technological savviness and ability.
They're a bit amazing.
It truly is.
But they don't do much besides that.
Well, but there's a lot of power in that, right? Because they can do more with less. So I think we really have to look at what they can do well and what they can't do well, and hopefully train them and educate them in the things that they don't do well and bring them up to the level where they need to be successful and contributing members of our society, and really take advantage of what they do well and use those tools to make us better also. So
Right.
I think it's a give and take. Ultimately, it's hard to put down any of our youth because we're their parents, we're their mentors, we're their elders.
Right, but it's so different than when we were little. I don't know how old you are. I'm 55, and I grew up every day eating at the table with my family, having a good conversation with the mom and dad. Heck, I even went to religious school for 8.5 years, which I don't think happens nowadays. And I mean, I wasn't happy to go, but you learn your morals and values via school, via your parents. And I'm not sure if I see a lot of that anymore.
Well, and I think indirectly, you really develop communication skills growing up that way. And that's my biggest concern is really communication skills, because what we're seeing is it's just taking more time to build those for our new hires, our new candidates, our new police officers. And we want to make sure that we have a police officer that the community wants. We want ones that are empathetic, that have the ability to lead, integrity, ethics. And it's harder to discern that stuff when you struggle with communication.
Right.
So we're spending more time on that, but we're also spending less time on teaching them how to use computer skills, on how to use social media to get our message out there, how to build relationships with the public that way. So, so I think that it's a give and take. I think it's a good problem to have when you have people who do care in this community. And I think it's both. I think it's the elderly and the younger. I think the younger generations just show it differently. And I think to the older generations, oftentimes that looks as like disrespect. But sometimes it's just as simple as having a conversation with each other and understanding where they're coming from. And I don't think we do that enough, not just in our community, but really our nation. If you look at
we're lacking of grace and everything.
Sure.
There's no doubt about it.
And it starts with us. It starts with the community leaders.
I really am trying to create social change. To me, it's nothing like I said when I was little, and the social is just. I think it's hard what we got going on personally. Sure. Every day I look at the paper. There's another shooting somewhere.
Well, but I'll tell you this too. I think what's not in the paper is important too. And there's a lot of positive things. And I've seen so many people in this community. I'll give you an example. Today, our officers are out there, and the Laramie Police Department Foundation funded several gift cards because it's Random Acts of Kindness Day.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're out there giving out gift cards. I just left the junior high and with one of our lieutenants, Lieutenant Tom Smith, and we probably handed out 10 different gift cards to different members of the community. We had the ability to interact with the janitors and the facility staff and teachers and student aides and students, and it's exceptional to meet those people and see the work that they're doing. And I don't think they get recognized in the newspaper. I don't think they get recognized in the media, but they should, right? Instead, we focus on that one shooting or that one negative incident, and we make it look so much bigger than it really is. And that's the downside to social media, is that it gives everybody a voice, and it gives
Instantly.
it gives you a much bigger voice than you would have had before. And sometimes it's really positive, and sometimes not so much. And I think you see that with the negative aspect of it. As a police chief, I want to highlight what our guys are doing. They're doing phenomenal work as much as I possibly can, and I really would like to see that in the paper more.
Well, one, our local paper part, has in all the communities have just disappeared.
Sure.
The local is no more. We used to get 20 minutes of local and 10 minutes of national,
Yeah.
and now you don't hear about local. And that I actually read that is actually a huge problem as well, because people aren't hearing about what's actually going on in their community.
Yeah.
Do you have the same problem that the military has, and that is acquiring people that aren't obese?
I'll say this. I think I don't know that necessarily it's a problem, and here's why I look at it differently. The military, you have to meet certain standards when you go in. As a police department, and a full service police department, and members of this community, we should make sure that we're looking at everybody. And what I'm looking for is character. If I have somebody who has a really good character, I can raise them to that level where they need to be physically. But we have a generation that didn't grow up the way that we did, as you mentioned before. A lot of them aren't playing sports. A lot of them aren't out there being active. A lot of them aren't outside. So you see them struggling physically. We really do have a lot of members of the current generation who are being raised by iPads, iPhones, video game systems, TVs. So they tend to be oftentimes a little more obese. I think a lot of times it's just retraining. And instead of teaching them again those computer skills and how to use that technology, it's teaching them how to have a positive relationship with food and physical fitness lifestyle. And those are things that we've been exploring within our recruitment. Is if I have somebody who's a really good person, they want to be a police officer, I can train them to be fit. I can teach them how to be fit, much like the military taught you and me.
Right.
But I don't know that I need that same requirement on the front end. Now, by the time they get out of the academy, I need that requirement. They have to be able to go out there and do the job, be fit enough to do it. But if I have someone who's a really good person, has a great work ethic, is willing to learn, I can teach that person how to be a police officer, and I can teach that person how to be fit. And our training crew is exceptional. Sergeant Asa Hutchinson, if anybody's interested, we are recruiting right now. We're looking for several bodies. Please reach out to him or myself, and we'll put you in contact with him. But
You give me information, I'll post it.
that'd be great. That'd be great.
A card, something, I'll post it
Sure.
on here.
I appreciate it.
I did have another question, and it was about as well. I'm sorry about the military.
Sure.
But are you having the same problem they are as well, where the drill sergeants are actually complaining that the kids that are getting there now, they really feel like they need an extra 3 weeks of training because these people can't even do somersaults.
Sure. Yeah.
And I can't understand not being able to do a somersault when we grew up with that learning in kindergarten.
Well, it's interesting because you would think they know what's coming into it, right? And usually, at least when I was in the military, I had a recruiter that had me well prepared to go in. So I think that some of that burden might be the recruiters not necessarily preparing them the way they should.
I don't know. Not knowing how to do a somersault kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, I can tell you this: my recruiter would have never had me go to boot camp not ready. And there was at least 8 of us that were going through the same pre boot camp program. So, and I don't know if it's still the same setup, but I believe the recruiters get bonuses based on how many people they recruit.
They do.
So it's interesting. It's good for them to get that person through boot camp. So a lot of that is just teaching them, and it's retraining their mind because they're growing up on maybe fast food or stuff that's not as healthy. And that's really a societal thing. We have fast food establishments on every corner.
Well, that they only put that in the low income areas in every corner.
Sure.
So,
but it's efficient and it's fast, and the parents can do it relatively cheaply compared to other restaurants. So it's a way to kind of, it's a means to an end. They can feed their children. So I think as a society, we have to have healthier foods is a bigger issue.
Oh, we absolutely.
But also we have to prioritize physical fitness and being healthy.
Do we have PE anymore in classes?
So it's interesting. We do here. So I just left the middle school and they were actually in PE, and I went and visited with them. So and they still have middle school sports and high school sports here. So that's something that where I come from, they don't have anymore in middle school sports.
Exactly.
So yeah, and a lot of that's, you know, it comes down to budget, and there's a lot of contributing factors.
In 2008, all that left. There's
Sure.
no more culture of music and arts and
Yeah.
PE. Those are all gone.
But I think it's conversations like this that can really get those things going again. And I think oftentimes we see that we get rid of things that were really positive and we need to fix it. And instead of saying, you know, we're not going to fix it or we don't have the money to do it, we have to do the right thing and fix those things. So I think there's a lot of contributing factors to why the military is having those issues. And it's the same way with us. But I think a simple philosophy change oftentimes helps us find the solution instead of always digging our feet in the ground and saying, hey, it's got to be the way that we've always done it. I mean, sometimes you have to look for new ways to skin a cat.
Right? No, absolutely. And I have one more question for you.
Sure.
If there's anything that you can change out here in Laramie as the police, what would you do to change?
I don't know if I could change this, but it would probably be to turn the wind down a little bit.
Yeah, the wind is crazy.
But as the police, and it's something that I intend to change, that I want to change, is I want to make sure that our community knows that we're here for them. This uniform, this badge, all of our uniforms, badge, our facilities, this is the communities. And we're here not only when they need to call us because there's an emergency going on, we're here for whatever they need. And I encourage them to reach out, come visit the police department, come meet your officers, come meet the people that are serving your community. I couldn't be prouder of the men and women that work in this building, and I really want to make sure that the community knows that our doors are open for them. Come introduce yourselves. We'd love
That's
to meet you.
awesome. How often do you have an open house?
So that's a good question. I honestly don't know that answer. That's something I'll have to look into. I can tell you that I have been out and about in the community with my lieutenants and our officers. We're doing a meet and greet with the chief, and I think it's next week. I have it here somewhere. We're doing a meet and greet at Wyotex next week, February 23rd at 6 o'clock. We've done 2 of them already. We've been out at different coffee shops. We had a coffee with a cop last week at Starbucks, or 2 weeks ago at Starbucks. We were at the Human Being the week before that. Just this morning we were out at the junior high, so we want to interact with members.
Do you get a lot of people showing up at those places? Because if not, I'd sure like you throw me something.
Yeah.
I'll keep on posting it.
So I'll
for
give you a
guys.
flyer for this one, and we have had a pretty good turnout at most of these events. And then we actually at the Starbucks, we had probably 10 of our officers serving coffee and meeting people, so it was actually a really fun event. And that's what I'm really passionate about, is I don't want the community only to see us when it's the worst day of their lives. I want them also to see us every day. I want them to see us. I want their kids to get to know us. I want to see them. The assistant city manager and I are coaching a youth basketball team. We play every Saturday at the community center. We'll be playing this week at 12:30. I'd love to meet people out there. So yeah, we want to be active. We want to be members of the community. We want to be participating and contributing too.
Do you feel that you have a lack of respect from the young people?
So you know what? It's different, and a lot of that's because of what we talked about. It's the way that they were raised. So they're raised to show respect differently. And as police officers, especially as we get older, I think we look at it as disrespect, as a lack of respect. But in reality, they show respect in a different way. And unless there's a societal change, I don't anticipate that occurring. So I think they're going to show respect in the way that they show respect. And oftentimes that's through conversations, it's through shaking hands, it's through, hey officer, how's it going? Hey,
Right.
Hey chief, what's going on? It's not the traditional where, hey sir, how are you?
Do you still get that? Because I know I walk down
Yeah.
the street and say hello to everybody.
So I do, and it really depends. And I think you have to, at least for me, I have to understand that it's not always that person's fault that they act the way they do. It's the way that they were raised all the time.
Absolutely.
And it's acceptable by society. So we have to evolve too and understand, hey, okay, how are they really acting? Is that a respectful way for them? Is that the way that they were raised? Is that the way that the community accepts it? So it's not the traditional way that you and I were, especially with a military background. But at the same time, I want those people on our sides too. I want to have relationships with everybody. And sometimes it's just about having a mentor.
And I'm not insulting the single parents, but
Sure.
you know, I do feel, again, we don't have the sit down at dinner time. The single parents working probably gets home, is like, I can't do this with everybody, you know.
So
maybe even two parents are working now all the time, and they still don't have that time
Yeah.
to really teach their children like we used to.
Yeah, and it's a tough
And
conversation.
I
because
do think that's a lack of problem too.
I can tell you, my wife was out of town this week, and I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and they both play basketball, different teams, different times, and I'm coaching one of the teams. And then we have council meetings, and we have work sessions, and we have work. So it's a juggle, and I can completely relate to single parents. I can completely relate to parents that have two working members in the household. It's tough, and with inflation and prices going up, it's a struggle to deal with it. And I think for the most part, these people, everyone in our community is doing the best that they can with the resources they have, and that's why it's important to reach out to some of our partners, like the Big Brothers Big Sisters. A phenomenal program, after school program at the rec center. The community rec center, by the way, is amazing. The staff there are amazing, and there's a lot of opportunities.
That's by the ABC Bank or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right across the way.
So, it's a great opportunity for kids to have somewhere to go after school, and there's a lot of facility members that work there, staff members that work there, even custodial crew that work there, and they're great leaders in our community. And just being around some of those people outside of the school setting sometimes can create that mental relationship. And that's really what we're looking to do as a police department is, hey, some of those parents don't have the ability to spend that time with their kids. Let us fill in some of those gaps. Let us be parts of this community.
That's awesome.
So that's really what I'm passionate about. I think that we have the ability to make a difference in our community, not just necessarily when it's the worst day of somebody's life, but we want to make it better. So.
Off the record.
Sure.
How do you feel about the Ukraine problem?
You know, to be honest with you, I don't know that I have enough information on it to give you an educated answer to that. I trust our federal partners to come up with the best solution that they can.
I'm getting a little worried when I read that our country's getting soft, they said, on wanting to help. And how can you not want to help freedom?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. You know, I always think that it's a balance as to where we're going to be as far as what we're gonna interact with and fight for, and what we're not going to.
And I'm pretty sure it's the ex-military who are like, we're soft.
Sure.
Because the people who grew up in the Cold War,
well,
they're like screw Putin.
Well, and with technology now, I mean, realistically, the United States military has a lot of technological advancements where I don't even know that they need people in planes flying to fight anymore.
Right.
So whether we're soft or not soft, I don't even know that we have boots on the ground to make that determination. But I'll tell you this.
We have boots on the ground.
Every military member that I've come in contact with, both overseas and here of the United States military, they're all heroes, and everyone I've met has always been willing to fight for this country. So the notion that our actual soldiers are soft, I don't think it could be further from the truth. I think our soldiers are just as tough as they've always been, and they love this country just as much.
Well, I believe the soldiers.
Sure, yeah.
You know, it's everybody else.
It's the leadership,
you
right?
know.
Yeah. So, and that's a tough one. You know, I don't know what that's. It's hard for me to send our men and women out on the streets because you never know what's going to happen. And as leaders, they have to make decisions to send men and women to war. And I think it's easy when it's not you.
Absolutely.
But when you take into account that it's somebody's mother, it's somebody's father, it's somebody's child, somebody's brothers, sisters, makes those conversations
kills me.
Tough, right? Tough conversations. So, yeah, and I have a lot of compassion for the people of Ukraine for sure.
I was just wondering what your thoughts were. I mean,
No,
I wear my hat everywhere I go.
Right.
I get a couple people saying, that's awesome.
Right.
You know, other people I don't think really give a crap out here about them.
Yeah.
But I think that's also because we live in the Midwest.
Yeah, some of that's a Wyoming thing.
You know, I asked somebody about the moral compass because I feel like our moral compass is screwed.
Yeah.
You know, and not maybe here itself, but just in general.
Right.
You know, and they were like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's interesting because if you look back, even with the Vietnam War, when all the soldiers were coming out, they would have said then that our moral compass was lost. So, and our country's endured. So, there's hope. I hope
there is hope.
So,
we need freedom.
This is Gary again, and I just wanted to say thank you very much again to the Laramie Police Department and Chief Browne, and thank you again. Please subscribe, please like, please share. Thank you so much.